Hello, welcome to another whiteboard tutorial. This one on classic mistakes to watch out for when adding and subtracting decimals. First classic mistake to watch out for. Nope. First is a not too tricky example. You thought I was going to go straight to the mistakes. I'm not. First, a not too tricky example. Here's the kind of example that, people do and they say, I can subtract just fine with decimals. Well, this is an example where everything kind of lines up and you can subtract the bottom number from the top number. In fact, in this case, there's not even any borrowing. So a person might get through this and say, hey, I got this. I'm moving on. However, not every example is not so tricky. Some of them have some tricks. The first trick to watch out for is making a classic mistake of not lining up the decimal points. This is the first hurdle to get through to really start mastering decimal subtraction. So if we have the number 3 74/100 minus 1 5/10, and I want you to know the first thing I'm going to show you is a mistake, we might set up the subtraction problem as we normally. Oh goodness, we can't see behind that hand, Lunt. We can't see behind that hand. Aha, but now that I have frozen time, let's look at what he did. This person lined up the 400s right over the 5, but that's 5/10. So now we're taking away a much bigger number from a much smaller number. The 5/10 is being taken away from 4/10, and then we're taking away one whole from 7/10. This is not going to work. This is like taking away $1 from 70 cents. It's not going to happen, and everybody's going to be very sad. So we have a mistake. Also, where do you line up the decimal point? Who knows? I mean, you could line up the decimal points diagonal, but then you have 359. And that's not what 3 minus 1 is. Basically, this is 3 minus 1. It's not 35 either. And it's not 3.5. And it's certainly not 359 thousandths. What do we do? Oh, this is mass hysteria. Dogs and cats living together. We got to start over. Here's the correct way to set it up. You write your 3 74/100, but you recognize that this is 1, 3 minus 1 whole basically, and then 5/10, which is basically like 50 hundredths. Boy, it's too bad you can't see so well. When you line the decimal points up and the decimal places up, you're able to do the subtraction in a way that makes sense. Let's say this is $3.74 minus $1.50. We can take 0 pennies away from 4 pennies, right? 4 cents minus 0 cents. 50 cents minus 70 cents, or 5 minus 7 in the right place value. And then we can take the $1 whole away from the $3. That's why it's important to line the place values up. So you're able to subtract the right size value from the right size value. Next up, we have another classic mistake to watch out for when adding or subtracting decimals. And this is using zeros. And I spelled that wrong. It's with an ES. Using zeros as a placeholder. Good way to remember how to spell zeros. Rhymes with heroes. Yeah, maybe that was just for me. But it's a good thing to remember. So using zeros as placeholders is important. And you might not know when it's going to come up if you haven't seen it before. So here's an example where, guess what? It's going to come up. 7.5 minus 2 76/100. Now when we just estimate 7 minus 2, we know it's going to be 5-ish. Let's keep that in mind for later. Always an important thing to do when solving problems. Estimate first. When we do the subtraction, we might know enough to line up the decimals, not make that classic mistake anymore. But we're going to make a different mistake here. This person has left a blank spot over the 600s. And so in their rushing, they have not put anything in that place, and they have just said, well, there's nothing up there, I'll just drop the 6 down. There's a problem there. That 5/10 is really 50 hundredths as well. There is something up above that 6. It's just that no one's written it in. But imagine, that's still there. 5/10, 50 hundredths. So when they start doing their subtraction, they're going to get an answer Sadly, that might actually be really close to their estimate of 5. So they could get the wrong answer and not quite know it. But unfortunately, it might eventually make them cry to know that they failed to put in a 0 as a placeholder. Here's the correct way to do it. And you'll see the answer is slightly different because you're not taking away 6 from the emptiness of space. You're taking it away from a real value of 0. When you realize you have place values that don't line up perfectly with a digit over each digit, add 0 as a placeholder in a way that doesn't change the number. You'll notice I have to take some borrowing. In fact, I have to take a couple steps of borrowing. I will borrow, I wish you could see this as I did it, but oh, it's too late. Anyway, I hope you know how to borrow. That's the correct answer. And the reason is because we added the 0 over the 6 as a placeholder. The next mistake to look out for is the same one, using zeros as placeholders, but here's a different example. When you have a whole number, there is a decimal point there, but sometimes people don't recognize where it is. Hint, note, it's actually, well, you think about it. If we line it up this way, we might notice that 4 wholes is lined up over 1,000th, and other things are lined up over different place values, and it makes the whole problem look bonkers, even if you can't see it behind my hand. If we do think about the fact that this is 0 and 581 thousandths, we might line it up correctly, but then do our subtraction by just dropping things down. And now we've made that same classic mistake of not adding in 0 place values. And we know that if we estimated, it should be less than 34, but now we've gotten an answer that's more than 34. Please estimate. It will help you know whether you're correct or wrong sometimes. So let's do everything right this time. We're going to put the 0, we're going to put the decimal point after the 34, we're going to put the 0 before the 581 thousandths. Everything's going to line up because we're also going to add the zeros above. It's going to require us to borrow. It's going to require us to borrow a heck of a lot because we're borrowing from zeros. I really intended for you to see this behind my stupid opaque hand. Opaque means that you can't see through it. There, I taught you something besides borrowing. But now, with the right borrowing, with the zeros in place, we can do the subtraction as it's intended, and we get a number less than 34. Chicking, smile, happiness. Now, let's see how you guys do with that. We're going to go over these 2 classic mistakes. I'm going to set up some problems for you, and I want you to check them out. Wait a second. That was way too fast to go over what we're about to do. Okay, A means lining up decimal points. B is going to mean using zeros as placeholders. Those are the 2 mistakes we've gone over. A is the mistake of lining up decimal points. B is the mistake of not using zeros as placeholders. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Actually, one long example. And you're going to decide whether I'm using example mistake A or B. Here we go. Let's say you got the problem 34 1/10 minus 7 62/100. We should estimate here and just know that it's going to be somewhere around 27. Did you notice the mistake? If not, pause. Take a close look. All right, assuming you found the mistake here, they did not line up their decimal points. They have 200ths being taken away from 1/10. Sorry, that's not lining up the decimal points. Mistake A. So as they get back to it, they line up the decimal points correctly, so it's 6/10 right underneath 1/10 and 7 underneath 4 wholes. They start doing their subtraction, but what's the problem here? Do you see it? If not, pause. Take a look at what's happened with their subtraction. All right, assuming you're done pausing, I hope you recognize that they made mistake B. And as they go through their subtraction here, they're going to find that their answer is not going to be the same as taking 2 away from 10/100ths. So let's set it up correctly for them. 34 1/10. We're going to add the placeholder. We're going to make sure the decimals line up and the place values line up so nicely. We're going to try and see through Mr. Lund's opaque hand, but it is impossible. Gosh, look at all the great borrowing he's doing. Now he's able to subtract correctly. Let's see if it lines up with his estimate of 27. It's pretty close. Oh my goodness, we did it. We did it. And thank you. Thank you so much for watching. You know, I thought about being a farmer. Once I did some work on the farm. But the thing about working on a farm is you can never leave. Because who's going to milk the cows, you know? Not them. No thumbs.